Hello, everyone. I'll give you a second to get connected to sound. Hello, and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 1281st New Social Environment. I'm Maglie, a programs associate here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring a.Monti, Erin Honeycutt, Katharina Ludwig, and Cole Swensen. And now I'll introduce today's guest and host. Erin Honeycutt is a writer based in Berlin. They co-edit WOMANWOOD, an open call smut gazette, and VORTEXT, a mail-order poetry magazine. In 2020, Erin began the publishing project CUTT Press for pamphlets, poetry, and reprints with the archives of Hopscotch Reading Room. Erin is the author of Dear Enheduanna and Night School. Katharina Ludwig is a writer, poet, theorist, artist, and editor based in Berlin and London. She holds a PhD from Goldsmiths, University of London. Katharina's research is concerned with narrative holes in women's writing and the temporalities of the wounded text. Katharina's first single-authored book, The Hole in Insurrectionary Poetics, is forthcoming as a parallel publication of one book and three opuscules with Ma Bibliothèque and CUTT Press. Katharina has a poetry chapbook forthcoming with Baulk Press and is co-editor of VORTEXT magazine. a.Monti is a cross-disciplinary poet, translator, and educator. They have facilitated seminars and workshops on experimental sound, contemporary poetry, archival research, and writing for performance. Monty is an associate editor at Litmus Press and co-edits WOMANWOOD and Open Call Smut Gazette. They have written for The Offing, McSweeney's, The Berliner, and Montes Press Radio. Monty is based between Berlin and New York City, but was born in an elevator in Rome going up to the third floor. And our host today, Cole Swensen, is the author of 20 volumes of poetry, most recently and, which was longlisted for the Griffin Poetry Prize, and a collection of critical essays, Noise That Stays Noise. A former Guggenheim Fellow, Cole has also translated over 20 volumes of poetry, prose, and art criticism from French and won the 2024 Alta National Translation Award and the 2025 Stephen Mitchell Translation Award. And with that, I will hand it over to Cole to get us started.
Thank you so much, Magli. And thank you all, Erin, Monte, and Katrina, to be with us today. We're really looking forward to hearing what you have to say. This series is all about people who give up their own writing time to produce the writings of others. So we want to thank you for that as well. And we're going to just leap in and start with the poetry readings. We always like to start with poetry. So let's turn it over to you, Katarina, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Cole. I'm going to read 5 short poems. I mean, 2 longer ones, 3 very short ones from a small collection I'm working on at the moment, titled The Girl Without, in which the girl should function not as a gendered concept, but rather as a position of becoming, from which loss and absence can be transformed into refusal as a means of resistance or form of sabotage. So I think the poems work in a way through a glossary and arsenal of militancy, weaponry, and violence. So a bit on girls with guns, women with weapons, queer militancy, and so on. Let's just begin. Domesticity. Reeking of ambition, my hands grope for rebirth inside the woven pile of a rock, infant hours of the night, demanding furnishings of a proper life, my hedonic forgetting, my underwear reverie, appealing to demarcations your teeth bite into my unflattering juvenile modesty. According to me, comfort is the splinter of broken glass in a hat. You know, gender is weird. My sagging belly, your indifferent fingers, personal effigies from fired clay my hands molded, and you extend into the subsequent splendor of a new dawn. A dream murder sleep, and egg rolls from the table. Let me read today's menu from your clothes and face while taking out loans from the future. While fruit spoils sickly sweet smelling in the garden, a poem written, I was never good at managing time. thinking about the color of the receiver public phone booth, I ignore your call, the stray cat sleeping on the heating pad, the coffee grinder squelching sound, a tremor, a shaking. Maybe the worst is that it looks peaceful. My handheld mirror holding up against damaged self. A friend's manuscript on the table, iron nails, blunt pencils, last year's seeds, and recklessness are my weapon arsenal, crammed into a small drawer under my desk, the dynamite crate under my bed, invoking ghastly triages of thought that encounter the semantics of reawakening alphabets. Our ghosts make themselves comfortable inside words. Palate politics prohibit the light to fall into the flats of the poor. Our greasy kitchens, the streams of leftover, the debris in the sink. Our rapport, unheroic wars, all battles equivocal. This is how I remember you and I had a bad time. Coming of age. You say you don't want to hear this. You say you worked hard to forget. Holy water frozen over or dried up. These are the two seasons. This season's cut is throat. Of those howling gods and saints climbing from the firmament, devouring sorrows and souls, and of the rulers whose gazes hacking cruelly the birds' wings and little hearts, gashes and flesh. Our dexterity in handling blades to defend the hairs running from a ravenous mouth, a body cut in two, slain by the light, we're sacred but screwed. In the depth of night we sung chants of ether, we understood nothing, still said something, inviting impatient melancholia. Hell sank and light fell. The Virgin framed in glass, gemstones and gold, reflecting projected spells, and we, the uncouth, denounce sacramental absolution. As expected, the house is full of flies, languid before the winter. On nimble promises, nurse my pastoral fantasies, your hand underneath my Bible belt, fumbling the buckle, vulgarize my fantasies, parochial and innocent, keep me aroused. There was always something indecent about the summer. You'll find my convictions well hidden underneath my coat, my woolen chemise, and I'm drawing with grey ash plans of factious tactics on your forehead, on your back, on the back of your hand. Elsewhere, a holy trinity loudly scatters to pieces, sparking solitary midnight frights. The seasons killed faith in my hand. Next season's cut is ties. Past season's color is irrelevant. Your iron nails through my palms. Descent. Many a creature and god sprang from heads, winged horses, giants bearing golden swords, craft, wisdom, and warfare, fully armed. Children of only one parent unborn, also harpies, vultures, hyenas, goats, damaged gods with bad habits, committing crimes. O head, site of intellect and ideas, alas, a dangerous place, they say. Yet severed heads never prevented something to come into life. Did you know they buried Rosa Luxemburg without her head? Did you know they buried Ulrike Meinhof without her brain? Postcard. The end of sought-after summers, the sky sinking low, clouds in my mouth. Dearest, I'm sending you love from the police kettle and wonder if you have eaten the slice of buttered bread I left on the table. I am too angry and tired to tell you again, to appear smart and informed, the name of those who ruin the world. Just take a bite of it, you will see that it's rotten. Continue walking, there's nothing to see here. Greetings from places where they keep people like us. Onwards. That's the last one. When questioned later how she possibly hijacked two planes, was involved in making and detonating bombs that blew up vital infrastructure, how she hid suspects in her tiny apartment, supplied food to those underground, and smuggled arms and information across borders, how she did copy and circulate insurrectionary printed material and banned texts and built barricades in the street. She didn't say all too much. She did. Thank you. And I hand over to Monty now, who helped me actually to choose these poems from the kind of manuscript. And I'm looking forward to hear yours, Monty.
Thank you so much, Katharina. Yes, I did have the enormous privilege of already reading those poems, and I was absolutely unhelpful because yeah, I basically pointed out 12 poems that I loved from the manuscript of 12 poems. So, um, but I truly want to bathe in the poems and want them to rain down on all of us on little sheets of paper. Anyway, thank you, Katharina, and thank you, Erin and Cole and Magli from the Brooklyn Rail and Chloe, for making this happen. Okay, I'm going to read an excerpt from a poetry log. Sometimes when people connect, either in spirit or through their bodies, something breaks. And it's like a fissure through which they can glimpse at another layer of time. The thin barrier of skin. It was so easy. Like I was so much bigger than the bounds of my skin. My forehead was dripping sweat. We were so exhausted, floating. Samira was talking about it this morning when someone asked her, "But how did you do it? When the meeting started to pick up speed and everything seemed to happen all at once, how did you do it? Did you just stop going to work?" And Samira said, "No, actually, we just did it all. We met in someone's apartment and talked all night about the world we wanted. And then we went to work the next morning. I would wake up at 5 a.m. to drive to my workplace. I was a scientist at the time at the Institute for Forestry, and I worked 10 hours, and then I would come back in the evening and meet the others, waiting for me in Prenzlauer Berg, and continue talking about a new society, a new world. And this is just how we did it. And of course, I was much younger, but I can tell you, I am so much more tired now. We didn't have things like advertisements, and the media we had back then, it was so terribly boring. So after the fall, things just changed. It's so tiring having to consume so much crap all the time. Commercials everywhere. I'm much more tired these days. Yes, I'm very tired. None of our worries are what they seem. We continue walking, and the cobblestones are oily from the sun and the many-souled years, and the wood-paneled libraries that turned into the French-Mexican fusion restaurant. The attic room with its dripping old eyes mumbles above our heads as we walk. I began collecting the books and the leaflets and the pamphlets because I thought we shouldn't forget our own stories. I thought that someday there would be women who would want to know, and I had so much space in my apartment. Actually, it was right there. I built those windows. It was 70 square meters, and I paid 50 shillings. And all the groups and all the mothers who met and wrote and never thought anything of it, I collected everything if they let me. A blue house, a privately owned house, a collectively owned house, a co-op. Soon the trees will shed their leaves again. There's too much to catch up on. A priest who went onto the town square in the old city and set himself on fire. Sidewalk made of yellow grass, struggling. The public desire for these photographs is very hard to gauge. I had to sell it. There was no space. The socialist mosaics covering the center. Uwe watching the gentle rain. The defunct bar. The stubborn thought. So bad you can't hold it in anymore. The loose ghost. The permeable surface. The flipped tables. Your inexplicable love. Your songs on the radio. The bakery on my way to the station with its terrible cheese sandwiches. The complex operation. The language of angels. which existed before the words for places. It took place over 2 nights. It took place over my time on this earth. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That was lovely. Thank you both. That gets us off to a really good start. I wanted to start with talking about networking. And I know that each of you is involved in several things and that sometimes they overlap, sometimes with both of you, or both of the others, sometimes with one, and always or often overflow poetry or writing strictly into sound or bookmaking or visual arts. And so I wondered if we could just hear from each of you describing the nature and range of your network. Maybe we'll start with Erin, since you're the voice we haven't heard yet.
Thank you, Cole. Thank you, Katharina and Monty. It's a big topic. It's the whole topic of a press, really, the network. Well, specific to CUTT Press, I would say, is that it's had the privilege of having this. Well, I feel like this practice of mine of making books and the fire under it, which is just a love of writing. It's sort of like it was coming from a long way, and then it was given shape in this bookshop that's below me, four flights down, called Hopscotch. And yeah, as many of you listening probably know, it's quite a nexus and a network, as any good bookshop is. And I'm just reminded all the time of what an important place they are as like a para-academic outside of an institution, independently financed, most importantly. So I feel like this CUTT Press has really been shaped by my time in the last 8 years as a bookseller. And that's also how I met Monty and Katharina. We also, we do like, well, not now, but previously, extensive events, and again, just like an incredible nexus in the city. And that's how I met both of you. You both walked many times. I think we just met with me as your recommending books to you and hearing about your projects, and it went from there. Yeah.
Great. And we'll hear more about these projects in specific, but maybe passing on to Katharina. Describe your network and what it overflows.
It's really a big topic. I mean, I was kind of spat into Berlin from London, coming actually during, shortly after my master's, actually, and then kind of leaving again for my PhD. And well, I would also say, I mean, it's like I was, to be entirely honest, I mean, I was maybe trying to get a bit away from art with a capital A, like. I started writing already in my master's, and then I connected in Berlin with what means the literary scene. There are so many scenes, but I mean, Hopscotch was a great place to see different readings. Erin was mostly organizing these events, and this is how I met Erin. Actually, I mean, through also my publisher, my bibliothèque, organizing readings at Hopscotch when they came over, and I think this is me reading there, me visiting, Erin recommending books, chats over the counter, followed by coffees and so on, or drinks. This is how we got into contact. And Monty I met because Erin sent me this email that we both definitely should talk, which is absolutely right. And it took us a year, I think, from this email to actually find a date where we could talk. And I think we only had 1.5 hours, and we could have said so much more in this 1.5 hours. But since then, we have been in touch more regular and not with a year time frame in between. Well, and otherwise, I'm still kind of connected to London in some way. Yes, so I would say my networks are somehow between Berlin, not London, and some kind of like small antennas to the States sometimes.
And Romania at the moment, I understand.
Yes, yes, that's the new one. I mean, still learning my way around here. I'm on an artist residency here for 2 months and in the countryside, a beautiful village in a blue house with, yeah, wide fields and beautiful nature, actually.
It sounds like you're stretching the network outwards.
Yes, definitely.
And Monty,
Yeah, I remember when I was talking with Erin, I think I literally was talking about the letter O, or I was just like, I'm really thinking about holes at the moment and like the letter O, and I'm also kind of always thinking about saints. And then Erin was just like, well, I know who I gotta connect you with. I know just the right person. And that was Katharina. And yeah, and also Erin, as we heard, I met at Hopscotch Reading Room, the big nexus of poetry in Berlin, and kind of never stopped following Erin around ever since that fateful day. But yeah, I mean, my networks, I do think it's, I think about it a lot that I was born in an elevator, like kind of like going like up and down. Like, I think this like movement, I just think I really like never stopped like moving and sort of stretching. And I think my, um, the places of my networks kind of reflect this a little bit. I'm very much in Berlin, but also very much kind of in Brooklyn, where I'm at now. In fact, I arrived yesterday, no, 2 days ago. And here in Brooklyn, I do a couple of things. Um, as it said in my bio, an editor with Litmus Press, who's a Brooklyn-based publisher. And yeah, that's kind of been like an important tether of my work too, as it's a small press, but it's also a pretty established press. Next year it's the 25th anniversary of Litmus, and so yeah, I think it's sort of taught me something about small press publishing, but also the how it can be perhaps made to be sustainable. Um, yeah, because I mean, I think for a small press, 25 years that's a respectful age. Um, and but then in Berlin, I'm also have my fingers in a lot of pots, such as WOMANWOOD, of course, the uh, open call smut gazette I do with Erin. And yeah, and I think my other socket in Berlin is I work a lot. You heard it maybe a little bit in my reading even. I started working a lot with the archives in Berlin, the queer community archives mostly. And I'm doing this very much in collaboration also with someone else, Lottie Seebeck. And yeah, we've been doing a lot of archival work with younger people, but also just yeah, leading different research projects. So that's also another deep connection I have to Berlin is through the archives. Um, yeah, I mean, I think those are the
I'd
main.
love to hear more about the archive. And I think that a number of you have sort of connections to a kind of research base and accessing archives. So that's something we'll want to come back and touch on. I believe there are some images, and maybe it would be a good moment to go to the images and see some of the actual work that you've produced and just tell us what you'd like to let us know about them. So maybe go back to that first image.
Yeah, this is actually it's just a very communal thing. This is a wonderful woman here in Berlin named Wendy Shaw. She was one of very few Islamic art history professors here in Germany, and a long-time customer of the bookshop. And I've worked with her in reprinting some lithography prints that she made like 30 years ago. One of them was it's like a leporello about a snail, a really beautiful unfolding leporello. And she is studying Arabic calligraphy, and she made this logo for me that was on the back of her book, and then let me continue to use it. So it's based on Arabic calligraphy, and I just love how it looks like a boat sailing. And yeah, Wendy Shaw, shout out.
I love too the fact that the C cuts through the S and the S cuts through the P. So there seems to be a kind of interactive cuts, but everything's still intact.
Yeah, really lucky. Yeah, this is our sort of like on the landing page of VORTEXT. If you go to vortextmagazine.com, you can find this. This is Katharina and I. We co-edit this mail order poetry magazine. It came about, well, we'd always been talking about what we're reading, what we always had a really good thread about bad reviews for books that we mutually shared. So a strong critical thread between us. And I think the impetus was thinking about something that is not really part of the economy, of the regular economy of books. And VORTEXT, you can't buy it in a shop. You can't buy it at a book fair. You can only subscribe and receive it to your home. And yeah, do you want to jump in, Katharina, if you want?
Yeah, it's also for free. I mean, it's our subscribers usually only pay the postage, just the stamps. I mean, we came from this idea. I mean, we were inspired by the Floating Bear by Diane Prima and Amiri Baraka. And I think it also was born a bit out of this post-COVID thing of trying to connect people by sending stuff to their homes, which is kind of like nice things, you know, not bills, not kind of like the horrible letters ones get, but kind of like a small present, so to speak. So I think we came in a way from that, and we're aiming for about 4 issues a year. I think we did manage. I mean, it's a year old now. VORTEXT birthday next month, kind of. And should we explain the whole project now?
Yes,
Yep.
do.
Usually, I mean, we came up, Erin and I, with the thought of writing is afterlife. So it's about connecting voices from the past through temporalities, through kind of like different times and media. And we usually choose a cover poem by a poet or writer we admire, or who speaks, as we think, kind of like to the times or to kind of like certain important issues of the present. And then we can invite up to 10 people, because I mean, it's a small magazine of 10 pages. We said we keep it as simple as possible. So it's just these 10 A4 pages, and we just send out the brief kind of like please go into a conversation with this cover poem, produce whatever you want. You have one A4 page, and we will basically print what we get from you. And yeah, this is
It's an interesting structure and premise. And do you invite the contributors?
yes. For now,
Yeah.
I mean, we can't do it with some. I mean, it's again this thing of kind of like it being a side project in a way. So we said we have to do it in somehow kind of like time economical. I hate this word economical, but so it's not I mean, it would be beautiful with subscription, but I think it would get out of hand and would get quite big. So for now and also, I mean, in a way, it's interesting. The next issue will be by a guest editor, by Monty, actually. And so it's like if the guest and editors also invite their kind of like people or their writers, poets, artists from their networks, we kind of like think the networks grows and expands. And this is a bit why we, yeah, keep the selection process in place for now.
And how is it printed? Is it offset or
Um,
mimeograph or?
the last 3 issues. So I've been printing it on a very specific recycled paper that can only be bought at the Deutsche Post. I don't know, as kind of a insurrectionary, I don't know, use of funding or something. Yep, there we are, collating the second issue, the first issue. I print them on a Riso printer that's here just over there. And yeah, but I use the Riso printer very much like a Xerox machine. And I usually only have 1 or 2 colors at a time. So it's a very simple process. Yeah.
Could you show us the printer? Would that be possible?
It's a little
Well, maybe after we see the
yeah.
images, when we go back to the
Yeah.
larger format, I would just love to see it.
Yeah, sure. It's a little messy over there. I'm a little embarrassed, but yeah, sure. I could.
Great.
Yeah.
So who wants to speak to this? Monte, do you want to speak to this one?
Sure. This is, I believe, the flyer for the launch of the second Womanwood publication, right? Which happened this January and in Berlin. And yeah, it was the second issue. Now we're on issue 4, right? Yeah, issue 4. And Womanwood is this publication that we started. It's all sort of celebrating. It's on, well, coming up to 2 years. 1.5-year-old baby, the smutty baby that we've been nourishing. And yeah, should we also speak about it a little bit, maybe? Well, it started because once again I followed Erin around. They were doing a reading somewhere and I went to the reading, and the readers at the reading were all sort of um reading pretty like smutty, erotic, sexy pieces without talking to each other, but that kind of coincidentally happened. And then it was amazing reading. And yeah, afterwards, Erin and me stayed back and smoked a cigarette, and before we knew it, we were like, wait, maybe we should start a publication of smutty writing. And yeah, that's kind of how it started. I mean, the first issue was the piece that Erin had read that evening, actually, in print, as well as this other person who also read that night, who T. Morgan, who wrote one of the strangest, weirdest, but also sexiest pieces of writing I've ever heard. And and uh and some writing by me. So it was those 3 um people that were issue 1. And then we kind of what was it, Erin? It felt obvious that it should be an open call format. Like we didn't even really talk about it. It was just like, it's like, yeah, obviously we should just like ask the internet if someone would like to just submit. Maybe also out of a desire. We were just like, oh yeah, we love reading smut. It was just like, yeah, let's see what will find us if we put out this call. And so we did. And then those people that, well, no, actually, there's more people in Womanwood too than you see right now on this flyer. Those were just the people that were in Berlin at the time. And also, I think all of them had, except for Lotta, all of them had a piece in the second issue.
And how is it that's produced? Again, how is it printed? How is it bound?
Yeah, so I was also going to say, I think at the time when we started plotting Womanwood, I had just so one big thing that CUTT Press does is reprints. So I had just reprinted The Lesbian Body by Monique Wittig, but not in many copies, a very small edition. Um, I mean, and this comes about from this practice of yeah, getting a good idea in the bookshop of what people want and what's hard to find. And I quickly realized that an English language copy of Lesbian Body would be a hot item. And so that's something that comes here. And I think we had started talking about that and also coming to power.
Yeah.
And so the first issue, it was also very simple. I mean, I do a lot of pamphlets, and I mean, the sort of ethos is like um, cheap, cheap and elegant, basically. And it was a very simple A5 pamphlet, reso printed and stitched with a thread. And this second issue, I also really I find that this practice is quite like maybe like choreographic based on where I am and the circumstances of the moment, like whatever ink color I have, because I don't have I don't get any like outside funding or anything. I mean, it just rotates through the bookshop and through book fairs. So this issue, I had been at a book fair in Sharjah, and you can see the sticker of the sun in Arabic. And I spent a lot of time in some stationery shops in Sharjah. And I really love stationery shops, like stickers and feathers. And then this is an insert page that's in number 2. That's not in every issue. It was just a circumstance that this issue should have like a letter, a blank piece of paper with a lot of frills where you can write a letter. Yeah, so that's where that came from. And then I printed it at a copy shop in New York, actually, because I went to visit my sister. So it kind of circumstantial. And then the third issue was again here on the Reso. And the fourth issue we will print in Kingston, New York with Obsessed Press, aka Raquel Stammer, coming up in January. So it is really, again, a network and circumstantial. There's no strict format as we move around our lives.
Yeah, it's a very itinerant press.
Yeah.
And that must get lots of different kinds of input, from suggestions on formatting to suggestions of writers to invite next time. And
Absolutely. I mean, depending on what it's the open call format is so interesting. I mean, I almost feel like it's like a like the Freudian subconscious zeitgeist of like whatever might be smutty in this time, but you get like a flavor of some kind of, I wouldn't say repressed, but you get like a flavor of the what's under there. So each issue kind of develops a flavor. And then depending on what people send us, like the last issue had a little insert because it was in Italian and English. And so, yeah, it's very, it can react to the moment.
What about bilingualism, trilingualism? Obviously, you all live and work in more than one language. And how do you find that? Are there uh, languages that are obviously more fluid, but what is it like to work in a language that's not your first and to try and create in a language like that? And just anybody leap in?
Monty, our grand translator.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm trying to think how I feel about that as, publishing other people's work. I can really maybe only speak from my own um, position as a poet myself. Um, where I really found English isn't my first language, and actually not even my third. No, sorry, not even one, two, second. It's not my second either. Um, but at this point, it's really my main working language in every area of my life, and honestly, more comfortable to me than German is. But I really sort of like needed this discomfort a lot when I first started writing to write in a tongue that is kind of not intuitive in this way. Um, and yeah, this is it really brought me to poetry actually to figure this out a little bit. I'm funnily enough returning a little bit to German in my writing because the same thing is happening. It's now German feels really strange to me. And there's something interesting in that for me too. So now my poems come out in German again. Uh, yeah. So, but I really we don't have, I think mostly the contributions in Womanwood have been English, right, Erin? Yeah, but there was this sort of Italian moment which I love too. Yeah, but I think I would love that actually bring in
Okay,
more languages. Um
here it is. Sorry, I happen to have it. um,
Oh, great.
yeah, I just happen to have it right here. This
yeah,
is the insert that's in Italian and English by Yael Magnini.
Great.
and
I, I
No, I was reading. I would be super curious to hear Katharina also as a poet writing in a language that isn't the mother tongue. It's something that I thought about actually a lot reading your poems, Kati, and was curious. It's always nice to meet a exophonic
It's
writer. Uh,
it's really like I could very much relate to what you said, actually. I mean, I did never write in German. This is like the funny thing, and which is also very strange in a way. I mean, of course, I went to high school in Germany, and then I left the country first to the Netherlands. Oh yeah, another network still existing, but first to the Netherlands and then to the UK. And in the Netherlands, I was also writing in English, and somehow I think in a way, I mean, I always liked how to say it, the best, maybe that in a foreign language, which is not the mother tongue, language becomes more a material, which can be more or less freely arranged or differently arranged. And also, I mean, I can only speak personally to my education, but in Germany, it was always kind of like that just I mean, that we were told kind of like to write or to daring to write. It's such an elite thing. You couldn't possibly just, fuck around freely with the language, let's say. And so I didn't even dare to touch the German language to write in or to write poetry in or to do my experiments with it. And yeah, well, so I, with me now, it's kind of like, as Monty also said, it's coming back in kind of like words, I would say. I mean, it's not so much that I would write a full poem in German or that I would write a prose piece in German, but it's kind of like that certain words which I translate back and forth and which I do think I do anyway. I mean, also if I write in English, I mean, I write, if I don't know, if I play around with puns, it's kind of like words moving between languages and then a bit into rudimentary Italian and to a bit of rudimentary French, and then it becomes it becomes this kind of like voices talking to each other. And in a way, I find this very productive and I like it a lot. And yeah.
Yeah. And Erin, I know you've spent a lot of time in both Amsterdam and Iceland and have translated your work into Icelandic. And I would love to hear about that.
Yeah, so I lived in Iceland from like 20 for 8 years. My yeah, real coming of age time from when I was 20 to like or 19 to 27 or so. Um, and I originally went as a marine biology assistant. And then I became really obsessed with learning Icelandic, and I did it very by the book, long winters with grammar. And yeah, my time there, I would, from this vantage point, describe it as kind of living outside of my mother tongue, like the door is closed, and I'm like developing some part of my psyche that's outside of the mother tongue. Um, Also, just in the um, yeah communities I was in. Um, And so it's sort of like this branch developed in Icelandic. And then when I only lived in Amsterdam for about 2 years, and then when I came to Berlin, I sort of felt like I found the door again to my mother tongue, but it wasn't. But it was through this very like English as a second language, this very multilingual community, and it felt like I had like found it in the first place. Like I had never, I mean, I of course have always been writing, but it felt like I met it um, again at the right time.
Great. I
Yeah,
know we have a couple more images. So let's,
yeah.
this is,
These are more of the. So I can between each womanwood issue, we have this kindling, which is like the little pieces of wood to keep the fire going. And these come about because sometimes people send us full length works that we can't cut up. They're complete works. So the one in the bottom left corner is from this amazing press in Athens, Katsarida, and they sent us this zine, and it's a like an erotic retelling of this 11th of this Greek myth about Luisepe and clitoris, and it's interspersed with yeah, dialogue from Pornhub. It's quite a zine, and they let us reprint it. Um, and then the Sixth Man Award by Jenkin Benson. It all takes place on a eighth grade basketball team. Um, it's a poem. Yeah, it's sort of like the locker. It's hard to explain. Nothing happens, but there's a lot of heat, and you're in a locker room, and yeah, it's remarkable. But with
and so going on to the next one, that wonderful mass of, are these some of your sort of bootleg reprints?
yeah, this is probably taken 2 years ago, but I just love the way this photo came out. This is a little bit of everything. You can see, I mean, when I talk about cut press, I feel like I'm just telling one big story, and it starts with one book and then it goes to the next one, and you can see there Dicte by Teresa Harkyo Cha, and I always say this is kind of like a um, a starting place, because it was during the pandemic, and the reprints of Dictée by University of California Press hadn't come out yet. And yet she was having retrospectives. People were having marathon readings of her work, and people were asking for her book, and it would have cost. It was during the pandemic, so shipping would have been a lot. And so to make it more accessible, I bootlegged, let's say, like 100 copies on the Riso printer, and it was for an event. So it was like a book that was made on an occasion. So that was also kind of the initial choreography of things. And we did a marathon reading with Teresa's niece and nephew, who were in Warsaw at the time. And we did it in the courtyard of the bookshop. And I was able to have these copies for everyone to read from. And like the process of making Dictée on this very old Riso printer, which does interface, so every page is scanned. And the Riso is very finicky, so it was a very like stop, go, oh, a paper is stuck. And it was if you know the contents of the book, it was a very like communion-esque kind of thing. And it, yeah, I'm really grateful for that book as kind of a starting place on the tongue, like the birth of the, yeah. It's Dictée, and it's also the materiality of the book. It's an incredible artist book. Yeah. And then there are things that were made with books from Hopscotch. So these are collaborations with the bookshop and with my colleague Siddhartha. He also chooses some books to reprint, and those are made, yeah, as a collaboration. And then there's this is maybe the second book that I made. It says Quarantine by Juan Goytisolo, and it's a handwritten copy. I handwrote the whole novel as some kind of homage, but also, yeah, as kind of obsession with something about the book, this limbo space in the book, that the afterlife of the author, dictating this novel by hand. So that's what. So
And
this is a little bit of everything.
with the one that was handwritten, did you then make plates and reproduce it in a number of copies, or is that only published as a single one-off?
So I handwrote it in my notebook, and then I scanned my notebook onto the Riso printer and made 100 copies or so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did you?
Sorry, here it is.
Great. If this is the last slide, maybe we should go back to the general view so we can see that more in a larger version. Thank you.
Yeah.
So would you hold it up again?
Oh, yeah. So don't know if anyone's familiar with this amazing novel. It's basically about this writer who dies, and then he keeps writing. And I just really have a great affinity to that notion.
Yeah,
And I
it's
think
beautiful.
it also cuts into, yeah, what VORTEXT is doing. It's a lot about the afterlife of not just legacy, but like the living, the reinterpretation and the bringing the archive to some kind of life. Yeah, and Goytisolo, all of his books were banned during Franco's time. Not this one. He was living in exile in Paris when he wrote this, but during Franco's time, they were all banned because he was very openly gay. And so it's also kind of an ode to the samizdat publishing of Eastern Europe, where books that were banned, that people would just handwrite them, and that would be the method of copying.
Wonderful. That's so
Yeah.
great to hear. Yeah. I'm noticing we don't have all that much time left, but I would love to touch on this idea of you all overflow into the visual arts, or there seems to be an interaction and interflow between in Monty for you sound and for everyone visual arts and archives. I'd love to hear just details about that if you could make some comments.
Maybe I will just, so visual for me, maybe not so much, but yeah, like you said, Cole, more maybe like sound and radio, which I think is also very much true for all three of us. VORTEXT just had a radio show, and WOMANWOOD too. We had like a conversation, on a radio show that I hosted at this project space in Berlin called 90 Mil, who very impressively installed a sort of radio booth in this old disused warehouse. And I had a stint of doing a late night radio show there, and also the archival work that I did, the kind of final. It's sort of many things came out of this one particular project I did with a group of young people in the archives, but the main thing was also a radio show, which, yeah, I think there's something like radio and this sort of small press publishing and zine. It makes a lot of sense that it feels like those are kindred spirits somehow of transmitting something in this way that's both um very accessible. You know, the radio you tune in, the zine you kind of, I don't know, you get it for 2 euros, which is the price of the stamp, or you sort of find the open call because someone just sent it to you and you can just submit. So it has this accessibility to it, and at the same time it is also hard to, it's like a, but there's only 100 copies of the zine, and so it has both underground and overground qualities to it.
It seems to circumvent all the kind of heavy apparatus that directs a more established, if you will, press. But at the same time, too, that idea that it's only in 100 copies seems to reinforce the community nature. You're only going to know about this if you're in the conversation. And I imagine the conversation is always spreading outward, but nonetheless, it's a conversation. It's word of mouth. It's person to person.
Right.
Katharina, how about you and with your PhD in art and wanting to get away from art with a capital A?
And my PhD in art in the end is kind of turned into a PhD of comparative literature, actually. So they had a bit of a problem assessing it. So we had to get externals who were kind of like more kind of like experts in this field. But I think for me, it's kind of like I don't make that much of a distinction anymore between the disciplines. I mean, my BA was actually in product design or design in Holland, where they also don't kind of like, yeah, just make distinctions between the disciplines. So in Germany, it would be you study fashion, you study graphic design, and in the Netherlands, it was just design, and you could kind of like choose your direction. And I mean, back then I kind of didn't dare to write yet, but always said kind of like I make objects or I make books because we had courses on bookbinding, courses on bookmaking. I make these things because they're a language in themselves. And it's kind of like writing, it's just objects. And I mean, the further I went with my education, it was like the more I started to write and to or dare to write. So it was just like learning a new language, I find. So, and I mean, getting away from art was probably also just like this idea of getting away from too much material, kind of like getting tired of producing more and more things into the world and then lugging them around and then finding storage for them. And then, I don't know, and I find writing so much more agile. And what Monty already mentioned with kind of like the radio shows and the dissemination of words and words as connectors, it works really well. And I mean, still, I would say Erin's uh, Erin's zines are definitely a kind of like artwork still. I mean, each and every one of them. And so I don't know. I mean, for me, this distinction is not that broad, I think, or that deep, this abyss between art, the different disciplines of arts.
That issue of portability, because one thing that also seems a thread through all of your lives is itinerance, moving, changing locale, changing communities, moving from these places. And as you say, if you can't do that with lugging a bunch of sculptures around, and poetry or any form of writing just goes right along with you. No storage needed. So that logistical thing seems, and then the zines as being a visual overflow, which are also extremely compact and seem to be sort of made to travel as well. Erin, you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, exactly on that point. So something that returns to me more and more in when I'm making books and thinking about books is the 2 years that I spent working in a video art archive in Reykjavik when I was studying art history there. And Steina and Woody Vasulka, Steina's from Iceland, and they sort of invented video art in the late 60s. They opened the kitchen in New York City, and they were living in New Mexico, and then they were shipping their archive slowly to Iceland, full of sand from the desert. And it was a lot of exhibition material. And I remember when I wrote my thesis, it was about like how they built these tools for manipulating the electronic image to expand this aesthetic vocabulary. I mean, it was a very like convoluted thesis, but what I was interested in, what I was inspired by, was finding in their archives how art historians and art writers in the early 70s, how it was like they were at a loss for words to describe video art, to describe an image that wasn't moving like a film, that was like this multi-directional static feed. No one had ever seen it before, and everyone turned to metaphors. And so I was actually very fascinated by that. But it comes up more and more how the process of like video editing and like the filmic quality of experiencing a publication is, and how in sequencing and blank page, how it's also an experience with the eyes and the body. And I'm always kind of surprised that it goes back to that, especially with zine editing, cutting up, and yeah.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that in. That's a really... And one last point, which we haven't touched on, I think it's super important, is your relationship with other feminist communities in Berlin or elsewhere. Is there an interaction with various feminist communities, those politically based, those culturally based, those artistically based? It's a huge question, and I ask it at the end. We should... Sorry for not having brought it in earlier.
No, I'll go. Well, I can just think of some amazing, you could call them feminist presses that I know and adore in Berlin. Lesbianas Concentradas, Alicia, hello. Rietveld Women's Office in Amsterdam, an amazing duo graphic designers. Yeah, somebody else speak and I'll come back.
I think maybe for me the Spinnboden archive comes to mind, which also has copy. This is the community lesbian archive in the city, and I always make sure to drop off copies there of WOMANWOOD. I'm not sure if they have VORTEXT too, but yeah, that also feels sort of maybe just this question of archive. It always is striking to me spending time in the archives, the amount of gratitude I feel for all of those people and weirdos and freaks who were sitting together in some living room and just putting stuff onto paper and publishing it, and sort of finding those pieces of whatever text material decades later in the archive is a really moving experience for me always, and that's also an extra motivation for me too, to for WOMANWOOD and in general a sort of motor to make in this, yeah, maybe like in the project of a lineage, but you know, like a, yeah, lineage outside of the, yeah, anything, and just that anything can be part of a lineage, but also partaking in it and creating it too is feels essential. But so it's always, I really always love that moment of going to the Spinnboden and dropping off zines there. And yeah, they're really I love the people there. Yeah.
Katharina?
I find it a very good question and extremely hard to answer in a kind of like a short way, but I would say part of Vortex definitely kind of like reaching out to writers and poets who we find kind of like could respond to the cover poem is kind of like always reaching out to other feminist collectives or building one in kind of like making new connections. And otherwise, speaking for Berlin, I would say I mean, there are so many micro scenes in a way, but what the places we meet or read, it's always kind of like similar politics, similar kind of ideas and interests. So everything is a bit shifted, and there's not kind of like this or there's not necessarily this kind of like institutionalized collective, but everything is a bit moving, but people are there and we do meet occasionally, we read, we do things together, and I think this is kind of how it comes about, maybe.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Monte, Katharina, Erin. And it's probably a good moment to turn it over to Magli, who will orchestrate the comments and questions.
Thank you all so much. That was such a lovely conversation. For audience members, if you have a question, there is a link in the chat where you can submit it and we'll turn right to you. We have a couple of questions. The first is, what advice would you give young writers interested in starting their own press today?
Shall I, or anybody? Okay, I'll give my 2 cents. Use the bookmaking process as part of your process. Of course, that requires, materials. Well, okay, basically, think cheaply and elegantly, gather with your friends, make your own, gather your resources based on who are around you. Who do you, sorry, I'm just blah, blah, blah. Gather your people who you like reading also, and have coffee and see what happens. If you find a box of some books on the street with great hard covers, take them home, rip out the guts, and use the cover as a binding for some books. I mean, I can get into a lot of like smaller resource things like where to find cheap paper. Ariso printers can be very economical. It can also not be economical. Big question. But use the book as part of the process, because I've found that so helpful. Like, here's something. Here, let me like turn it into what does it feel like to read it in this format as an A5 pamphlet, or what does it feel like to write it huge on a poster and give it to my friend and see what they say. Yeah, as part of the dissemination of creating a public for your writing. Yeah, email me for more specifics.
I would also say come up with a name for the thing that you do. Because once you name it, it's kind of, then it's sort of happening. It's the weird magic of words. Name the press, and it shall exist.
Yeah, and you can steal a lot. I mean, if you have a day job, print at the office printer, take their paper home in smaller amounts. I mean, this is how I did my first publications, actually.
Thank you for those answers. The next question is, how do you decide the design of each of your publications for the press? Colors, sizes, artworks included?
Extremely circumstantial. Like sometimes, like for instance, here next to me is Proverbs of a She-Dandy by Lisa Robertson, who I knew that this was only available. It's her amazing writings about the agency of menopause, and I knew that it was out of print and it was only available as a PDF. And I asked her permission to make a pamphlet version that was more portable and cheaper. And so this was kind of an obvious answer, an answer to the conundrum. I mean, in many ways, like the A5 pamphlet is a standard, simple thing to go to because printer paper is A4 and you can fold it. And but everything is, I think there's no real like set standard. I think that's part of the really fun process is seeing what materials I can find, and in that way, it really is like feels like an artistic practice, I guess, because I don't work for anyone else. That's the weird thing. Yeah.
Incredible. We have another question from Tess Brown Lavoie. You all talked a bit about strangeness in languages and distances between languages as having generative potential in different ways. Are there ways besides what you already shared that you pursue strangeness towards poetry?
Hey, Tess.
Okay. I love that question. And I think, well, poetry is so, for me, it's so strange. It's kind of the strangest of all um, forms of, there's a lot of weird art out there, but poetry is particularly strange because it is it deals with the most metaphysical of substances, um, these words and languages. So I think it's really it sets you up for already a very strange experience to read poetry and write poetry. Um, and yeah, Yeah. Uh, yeah.
Hi Tess, come back to Berlin next summer. And I would have said more or less something similar to what Monty said. It's strange in itself, this whole poetry, writing, reading thing. So probably it's just like this cesspit of strangeness. We're all kind of like dipping our hands and feet in, or pens in, much rather. And yeah. So
Are you
no.
going to say something, Erin?
I was just going to say, well, strangeness implies meeting, a grand meeting place, because you can't, it's implied that they're in the strangeness, there's a lot of connections happening. I'll just say that.
Thank you for that question, Tess. The last question is, what are you all excited about next?
Okay. Um, well, there's a lot of things coming down the pipeline that I lie awake in bed thinking about how to finish and well, how to finish making them. So I'm looking forward to bringing them out. Okay, what I'm most looking forward to is I made a recent bootleg of this 1987 encyclopedia called Castle's Encyclopedia of Trans, Non-Binary, Queer Mythology and Folklore. And it's 400 pages, and I made 50 copies, and it really feels like a culmination of this studio practice because I'll be moving at the end of the year into another studio. So it's like using scraps and archives from the Riso printer, which has a little bit of like there's all these scrap papers that use a little bit of everything I've ever printed, and they're also going inside of it. So it's become this like encyclopedia of mythology interspersed with like archive layers, bookmarks of everything I've ever printed here. And then there's gonna have like ribbons braided as bookmarks in 3 different books, and they're gonna be in a tote bag, and I might spray them with perfume and just be ridiculous. Like I just giving myself permission to be ridiculous. But it feels very like it's a way to like pull something together, and it feels like a ritual in the making. And yeah, I'm excited about that.
I love that. I am, believe it or not, excited about many things at the moment. What a luxurious thing to be saying. Um, but I really I think we mentioned in the beginning we're gonna print Womanwood in January in Kingston in upstate New York with this really amazing person that Erin also already mentioned, Raquel from Obsessed Press, and I am super excited for that. We're also sort of planning a little bit the launch, which is still to be confirmed, sort of. Or maybe it's not. It's because it confirmed.
January 8th at the Old Dutch Church.
It's confirmed January 8th at the Old Dutch Church in Kingston. That's exciting. And then, yes, Katharina and Erin invited me to guest edit VORTEXT this season. And I've been extremely secretive about who I asked to contribute. And the big reveal is upon us in maybe even just a couple of hours. I will know. And so I'm super excited about that and sharing who I got to invite for the next issue. Yeah.
Was also thinking about a lot of things to be excited actually about. I mean, I'm kind of excited about also returning to Berlin, working on, I mean, assembling the next VORTEXT, kind of like addressing the envelopes, then sending it out. I mean, hearing about what the contributors list will be before, of course. Then Erin's book launch in January, kind of, yeah, a lot of small things, but it's these small things which keep one kind of like going, I find.
Nice. Well, thank you again. And Monte, you had mentioned that you're a guest editor, associate editor at Litmus, and I just wanted to say thank you, Tracy Grinnell, who is the founding editor of Litmus, for joining us and sort of being implicitly part of the conversation. And now we'll end with Erin.
Thank you, everyone. Total pleasure. I will send us off on a good note, a good boat. I thought it would be fitting to read something that's from a book that will be an excerpt from a book that will be published next year by Ma BIBLIOTHÈQUE, and it's called Night School, and it is a lot about writing and reading and publishing, the unconscious of publishing or something. So this is a short piece about the printer. Learning the process reminded me of learning to drive a stick shift. I loved connecting with the car in a way that bypassed automation. I was required to listen to the machine and adjust accordingly. One hand on the wheel, one hand on the gear stick, both feet occupied with clutch and gas. It was a brilliant feeling of intuitive oneness with the machine. With the Riso printer, there was a similar need to pay attention and to listen and to be ready to respond at any moment to make sure things went smoothly. It was all troubleshooting and reading the little map of the machine's insides on the diagram. A section would light up wherever the problem occurred. Perhaps the masters made on thin paper were piling up and needed to be discarded. Perhaps there was a paper jam. Perhaps the ink roll needed twirling. First, I made 100 copies of the front pages and organized them into neat stacks on the long table. Then it was time to flip them all over and print the other side. It was beyond literal, the most literal process I could ever imagine. The way you put the paper in was the way it came out the other side. When you made the master, you put the page face down, and it appeared face up in the tray. There were uncanny moments where a glitch would happen and the troubleshooting would begin, and it would be like revealing the stomach of the book. In the way that problems reveal the structure of the machine, these very unautomated processes of adjusting to the printer so that the book could be made was akin to the book being revealed to me during its surgery. There were moments of a paper jam when I would fish inside the center for the stuck page, pull it out, and of course I would have to read the page as though it were a special message. The page would inevitably be about the production of voice, the tongue revealing itself as a long open road that stretched before you, and the breath, the weather above you. As you drove down this road of tongue in the cavity of mouth and weather, whatever the weather may be, the mechanics of tip of tongue, back of throat, back of teeth, lips together, fricatives, glottals, sudden stops that caught the air or allowed it to pass through. The mouth of the printer presented all of these variables as the road opened up during the long drive. I listened to the hum of the motor, and in one motion of my foot floating for a half second in the same instance as my forearm aligned with a groove, full stop, continuing, gliding forward. I opened my mouth. I read the diagrams of the machine. reading them because of the words and reading them because of knowing I should be able to do so. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Erin. That was so beautiful. And thank you, Monty, Katharina, and Cole. We'd also like to thank the Terra Foundation for American Art and Tiger Foundation for sponsoring our NSE program and making these daily conversations possible, and for their support of our growing archive, which you can view on the Rails YouTube channel. The Rail has been free and independent for 25 years. A donation directly supports our writers, staff, and operations. Support our work through the link in the chat. And if you're free, join us tomorrow at a special time of 11 a.m. for a conversation with Jane Lombard and Ariola Pira on the 30-year story and work of Jane Lombard Gallery. And as Israel tradition, you can now all unmute and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you all so much for being here today.
And thank you, as always, Fong Boy, for all your work and the Rail and the Rail staff for making this possible.
Thank you.
Thank you so
So
much.
much.
Thank you so
Erin.
much. Thank you,
Thank
so
you.
much, everyone. Thank you, Monty. Thank you, Erin.
Thank you, Erin. Thank you, Cole.
Thank you.
Thank you,
so
Fong.
much.
You're the best. So much.
Bye,
Keep up the
everybody.
good work. Everyone, please.
Bye, everyone.
Katharina,
Take care.
long live.